Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly Wright. I am the County of Riverside. I'm with the County of Riverside's Office of Economic Development, and I am the Economic Development Manager. And so happy to have you all on this morning. And as you may have been on part one, this is part two of the effects of automation. And we have with us Dr. Johannes Moenius. And I'm just going to take a moment here to go over his bio. Dr. Moenius, let me see here, teaches global business at the University of Redlands. He is the founding director of the Institute for Spatial Economic Analysis, a founding partner of SEI Consult, and holds the William R. and S. Sue Johnson Endowed Chair of Spatial Economic Analysis and Regional Planning. Previously, he taught at the Kellogg School of Management and was a visiting scholar at Tokyo University. He studied management science at Bamberg University and economics at the Technical University in Dresden, Queen's University, Canada, and UCSD, where he received his PhD. He studies how standards, platforms, and automation affect local economies. You may have seen him around. You may recognize his name. He is a regular contributor to the media, such as The Atlantic, LA Times, NPR, and PBS, and has spoken at many universities, conferences, and government institutions. So the discussion points and topics today aren't necessarily the views or opinions of the county, but such great information coming your way and very thought-provoking information, and definitely conversation to consider. And just a couple housekeeping items this morning. Feel free, as you were hearing from Dr. Moenius, feel free to use the question and answer area down below here, enter your questions, and at the end, last 20 minutes or so, we'll be happy to go over those questions that you might have. And this is also being recorded, so if you'd like to listen again or share the content, feel free to grab our YouTube channel information, which I'll put in the chat. And you can watch it at a later point or share it, like I said. So very nice having you on. Thank you all so much for being here. Dr. Moenius, thank you so much for being here. Your bio is most impressive, and you are such a wealth of information. So looking forward to hearing from you this morning. I am going to turn it over to you, and here we go.
Thank you very much for your very kind introduction. I hope that I can now really match up to all these words that you provided here for us. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. And for those who have not been able to join us in our first session, so I will give a brief summary of the main results, what we've done there. So if you think, oh, I missed the first part, so I should rather switch off right now, that is, I hope, not necessary. So last time we looked at the causes and drivers of automation, and today we'll really ask, well, what can we do? So the questions that I addressed in the whole list was really the what, why, who, where, when, and how questions that every good journalist is supposed to address when he drives to a accident scene or some place of interest. And so the only thing that I will add to the journalistic endeavors is really, what can we do? So we covered the first four last time. So today will be, when will it happen? How will it affect us, if at all? And what can we do about it? So let me rephrase that a little bit and look into the questions for this part two in a little bit more detail. I will specifically focus on how workers will be affected. I could have also asked how companies, students, small businesses, or specifically manufacturing, or the logistics sector is going to be affected. The reason why I focus on workers is at least twofold. First of all, if we think of students, small business, or manufacturers or companies, I actually have prepared a separate talk specifically for students. So if you're a worried parent or if you know students that you think should really hear about that, I will, before the end of the day, post a link to a talk specifically addressing students' concern in the face of automation. Tomorrow, I will also post that, or if you are a member of the Manufacturing Council of the Inland Empire, you probably are aware of that. I will actually give a talk specifically to address these issues in the context of manufacturing. And a lot of what I'm going to say tomorrow will be also relevant for people that run small businesses or run businesses at all. So if you are a small business owner and you would like to have specifically additional information how to deal with it as, or what to expect in the context of the company view, please look at the link that I'll provide also before the end of the day, actually right after this talk, into tomorrow's presentation. And like companies, moreover, whenever they have a problem, they know how to deal with it. They just go and call their favorite consultant and they will help them through this. So anyway, so I will specifically focus on workers because that is the core of interest for economic developers. And I will, of course, here address the issue of when will we start feeling effects, and specifically when we will feel them here in the Inland Empire. And so if there are going to be any effects, if you share that view with me, then the question is, what can we do to prepare? Okay, I also need to do this little disclaimer that we already heard for the county. All views presented are solely the authors and do not represent official positions, neither of the University of Redlands, IC Publish, ISEA Consult, nor any of our sponsors, and financial support of an anonymous sponsor and the Hall Network for Public Policy at the University of Redlands is gratefully acknowledged. Thank you very much. So for those of you who were there in the last presentation, I started out saying like, yeah, you've heard the introduction of, yeah, I'm teaching global business and so on. But the way I want you to think about me is rather a little bit different. And that is, I want you to think of me as a guy who gets up in the morning and thinks, well, what do I need to do today to help prepare society for the coming change challenges of automation that I really think exist? And what skills do I need to acquire in order to do this at least a little better than yesterday? So this is my main concern. That's the stuff that keeps me up at night and keeps me up and brings me out of bed in the morning. And so I will close today's talk with a little bit of a variation that you may be finding worthwhile to consider. So as I said, like last time, we covered the why, what, why, who, and where. And I want to start out with a brief recap. So based on the data that I presented last time, we can make those 5 points. Number one is, while we do see accelerated investment into automation, we also see accelerated deployment of robots specifically. And the speed of deployment is faster than what we've seen in other previous technological revolutions. And I will show that graph a little bit later again in context in case you wonder. There's also an indication that investment had shifted from investment into consumer products to investment into processes and process automation. There is not one, but there are many drivers which pose both a threat as well as an opportunity specifically for us here. The diversity of drivers really allows the new wave of automation to target all sectors and all parts of the value chain. Why is that important? Well, historically, robots specifically have been pretty much contained in the manufacturing sector, and that's about to change. If you think of the IT revolution, it really didn't, or the internet revolution specifically, it's the easiest. The internet revolution really targeted transaction costs. And with that, everything that had to do with things that were outside of the production process. So now we have new technologies coming up that target production as well as transactions and make both of those parts more efficient. But in principle, the economic principles that were valid or important before and had been at work in previous industrial revolutions or technological revolutions, those mechanisms have not changed. So we actually understand those mechanisms quite well. But since we have many drivers, they're actually, in this context, quite complex, which makes predictions so hard. And which also leads that you read all these confusing messages that I've presented at the beginning of the previous talk. So we should, however, expect that the mechanisms work out the same as in history, and therefore we should see historical precedents to be a good guideline. I also pointed out last time already, so like, you read all these apocalyptic messages, like, so even the Daily Mail in the UK once quoted me and says like, "Robocalypse now." So like, an American professor predicts robocalypse. So that's not what I said. Excuse me, but that's why I want to be very explicit here when I say that here. Does that imply mass unemployment? Well, the answer is not necessarily. That means, yes, we could see it, but it's not really something that is a given. And so I don't know anyone who can really with full confidence say that they will see mass unemployment. What we all agree on in terms of the economics professions is that it implies tremendous restructuring. And that is really the key to understand. We need to prepare for this tremendous restructuring that's coming. And so, and as in history, we should expect regional winners and losers. And specifically, our goal needs to be that we are not becoming the Detroit of the new automation revolution. Detroit has suffered badly over the years of the manufacturing revolution that happened with robots. And so there will be regional differences that we need to really be aware of. So the question that we really have to answer today is, will we be able to transform our economy in as little as 2 decades? And what can we do in order to transform it? Before we do that, we really need to understand how it will affect our workers. And so there are 3 dimensions that I want to look at, which you probably consider as in increasing importance. Let's first look at job quality. Will job quality be better or worse? Secondly, pay. Will workers be financially better or worse off? And third, job counts. Will there be more jobs created than destroyed? And that's the last one is specifically what I guess that economic developers will be interested in. For this, let's take a quick look into history. This is a picture of Fukushima, the nuclear power plant that was so badly hit by a tsunami, an earthquake and tsunami, and then spilled radiation all over, almost all over the world, but of course most intensively and directly onto the coastline of Japan. And there was a major disappointment at that time because there were robotic companies and security firms that tried to then use their robots to help with the situation and remove debris and get to the sensitive parts of the hot spots of the area, and they simply couldn't do it. So then I still remember getting goosebumps when just talking about it. I remember this incredible sacrifice that specifically older Japanese engineers made and said like, well, we are closer to the end of our lifespan. We go in there and fix what is necessary, sacrificing pretty much their own lives and at least health. And so after that happened, then people started to think more about, well, what kind of technology really do we need to deal with disasters like that? And I think, it was DARPA who then set up a competition to inspire robotic companies and researchers to build robots that can deal with disasters like this. and they set up specific requirements. A robot that needs to be able to walk over stairs, another one that can actually get into a car by itself and get out. And so then one company that you may have heard of really mastered the art of dealing with that is Boston Dynamics. And you may have seen the Spot Mini, the Spot, the Atlas, and well, you will soon see the handle actually in warehouses around San Bernardino and Riverside. I'm pretty sure about that. I think it's just going on the market right now or very soon. But if you haven't seen it, go on YouTube, search for Boston Dynamics, look for the so-called, like the video, the dancing robots. It's absolutely stunning what they can do. So you can push them, and they can recover, like all of them, even, like Atlas, the two-legged robot here, they push it with a stick, it recovers. They kick it, they run into Spot, it fully recovers on ice. And so it's unbelievable what these machines can do to recover themselves. So Fukushima, in a sense, was not the birthplace, but an important accelerator to take humans out of safety risks in the future. So the first thing, will workplaces become safer? The answer to that is at least we can avoid high-risk operations for humans in the future. Whether we'll do it is a different story, but we at least will be able to do so. The second thing that you may think of, this is also like, again, Japan. Here, someone carries big boxes on the fish market. I guess he would like to have a tool like this, which is an exoskeleton that allows him to do the same thing pretty much with the help of electric power. And so this allows to really combine human motor skills with machine strength, and the applications that you're more inventive than I am, I guess, in this respect. So everywhere where hard human labor is required, those types of exoskeletons can be used specifically when it requires adaptive behavior that is so hard to teach to robots. But also in healthcare, like just think of people that have trouble walking, they can benefit from that. And something very mundane. I don't know what the worst days of the years are for you, but for me, it's the tax day comes first, and every month when I need to hand in my travel reimbursement forms, well, not so many this last year, as you can imagine. Then this is always like, you need to collect the receipts, you type the amount in the form, you glue that on paper, you send it to your supervisor for approval. And finally, it went to the finance department. They made 20 checks and so on. And and then you finally, if you didn't get a call, you at least got a check. So this can all be done with what's called robotic process automation. You just need to scan your receipts, and then the rest is done all automatically. And so whether it's even checking whether you violated any rules, for us that would be at the university, if you ordered any alcoholic beverages, then your supervisor would come up and say, and so then I would definitely not get a reimbursement for that. So, but if it's all clean, then it would automatically go from scan to the deposit within a much shorter period of time. Just think of that, like I'd be very happy to be set free from that type of mundane task. So I dare to say that we at least have, for a wide range of activities, the chance to make the quality of work much better. It might be for some that this is not going to be the case, but that depends on a lot on how we manage it. So you may have heard the saying, there will be only two types of jobs in the future: those who do machines what to do, and those who are told by machines what to do. So I can imagine that the latter job quality may not be so great, but so far we have to see how this plays out. But we at least have the potential for a much higher quality of work. From last presentation, a recall slide that has been put together by Acemoglu and Autor in 2010 already. They showed that the wage difference, I hope you can see my mouse. Can you see actually my mouse on the screen? The wage difference between those who had professional degrees, which is the top line, meaning doctorates, masters, lawyers, and so on, and those who didn't even have like a high school degree, this wage gap has been increasing in real terms over time. And it started pretty much in the 1970s. And so then it accelerated in the 80s. In the 80s, that's when the PCs came on the market. You remember that. And then in 2000, we had the internet revolution. So we should be prepared, if history is a guide, that income inequality will increase. And so the answer to the second question is, what will the pay look like, is not as promising. Why? Well, number one is there will be winners and losers. It actually turned out, if you think of the Industrial Revolution, now we're going like hundreds of years back. During the Industrial Revolution, the median real wage, meaning the wage, 50% of the people above earning that age and 50% below earning that wage. The median real wage was constant for, according to the calculations of these authors, for about 70 years, 70. Now, of course, now the developments happen much faster. We don't expect the new automation revolution to take 70 years. You're rather thinking of 20 years or so, 20, 25 years, 30 years maybe. But we don't expect wages to be constant for that long. But we should be prepared to see widening income inequality. And there are some issues with that, because if you think about the jobs that have been created, and you all know that, you've seen it like in detail, literally at your doorstep. There were jobs created up here in this area for college graduates and people with professional degrees. But the large majority of the jobs was actually created down there for people that don't have the same level of education as the people in with professional degrees. Okay, so that of course poses a problem, since we expect the new automation revolution specifically attack jobs in this educational bracket. And I'll show you a slide for that in a little bit. That's just a preview. So now for the third question, job counts. Well, of course, that's a multi-trillion-dollar question. How will future automation play out in the job counts? Which jobs will stay or even grow? Which jobs will go away? Which new jobs will emerge? All questions that are requiring very detailed analysis, and I can just give you kind of some general answers to that at this point. But so the real big question is, will job growth outpace job losses? So in the sense, we always had job churn, but what we are most interested in is the net effect. Will we have job growth or losses? Let's look at history here. This is job churn, what you see here. So job churn means job reallocation, people moving from one job to another. Then entirely new job creation that you see here as this is the job reallocation, which is the largest of the lines here, and that's data from 72 till 88. I'll show you a little bit newer data in a second, just not quite as detailed. Then you have the job creation, that is this dotted line, and then you have the job destruction, which is a black solid line. And then from that, you get the net growth. So we have actually much smaller amounts of what we see in our employment numbers than what's really going on in the background in our economy. And that's what we need to be aware of. And what we expect is that this job churn, meaning the job reallocation and the job creation and destruction, that these numbers all move up this line. And we need to be prepared for that. So how did it play out more recently? Well, from 1980 to 2012, and then actually I looked at data that's not fully comparable, so that's why I didn't include it. We've stayed pretty low. You can see the trends for job creation destruction were moving downward. And we need to understand why did that happen. So we're coming out of a phase where we've actually seen a downward swing of job allocation. So people stayed in their jobs for longer. But now you've seen, you've probably read the news with what's it called, YOLO and FOMO and all these new buzzwords, you only live once, and fear of missing out, that people are getting more worried about, like, do I have the right job? Do I need to quit? And so on. So that this is, and a lot of people, so is the anecdotal evidence, at least, and some survey evidence, are now considering to switching jobs. And that may be actually not such a bad thing for the economy overall, because then we reallocate resources in their best possible use. And so in this sense, to just jump ahead a little bit, COVID already was an accelerator because COVID made people think. Okay, so if we really want to figure out whether job churn and specifically job destruction will matter, we need to understand what the relationship between labor costs and robot prices are, or like the machine costs in general. Oops, sorry. Yeah, and what the blue line here is labor costs, and the beige line is robot prices. And you can already see, in a time when robots were just employed in the manufacturing sector, or predominantly employed in the manufacturing sector, that this scissor widened over time. So what do you expect if you see something like that? What businesses will do? Hire more labor or buy more robots? Now, mind you, this is still the time before robots entered the service sector. So when robots enter the service sector, then we reach a different level of economies of scale, meaning robot price drops will, relative to their capabilities, accelerate. And so we need to be prepared for additional movements down this line. Okay. So on the other hand, I just want to have you focus on the right side now, so that we get through the main points. What you can see in the last 10 years, or a little bit more than 10 years, we had certain parts of the economy drop jobs, and other parts of the economy increase jobs. So the problem is here that most of the jobs, the growing sectors of the economy, were in what's called the low value added sector. So the high value added sectors are utilities, financial activities, and information, and say manufacturing. And so you take your cut wherever you want it. But we had mostly jobs develop in transportation, warehousing, retail, trade, professional and business service, leisure and hospitality, and education and health services. That's for the entire economy. That's from the Wall Street Journal. Now let's look at how that plays out in the Inland Empire. So these are our largest sectors, but now you can't fully compare that. I need to point that out to you. So this is by industry, this is now by occupation. So but just look at the occupational groups that are most related directly to industries here, like transportation and material moving, food preparation, sales and related production, and so on. These are amongst our largest sectors, occupational groups in the Inland Empire. And as I pointed out last time, they have large automation risks. So this is 79%. So this is actually the share, not a percentage risk. So this is 75% of the jobs in transportation and material moving can be, with current technology, be replaced by machines. In food preparation and serving, it's almost 90%. So our largest sectors and the largest sectors here for the US economy as a whole are the ones that are A, low value added, and that had the highest growth. So if that doesn't give you the chills yet, then let me show you another slide. So one question is, of course, yeah, that's all good and nice, but like we need to have the right macro environment to actually make that happen. And so I know this looks like a weird, wild slide that engineers would discuss, but I want to unpack that for you because it's actually quite simple and straightforward when you look at it. So, and when you walk through it. So what you should expect is if you have lots of researchers, lots of people that work in R&D, then you should see a lot of technical progress. So technological base gets a plus for technical progress. So the more researchers, the more technical progress. Okay. So on the other hand, if you have high interest rates, you can't implement the technology. So, but low interest rates, so the lower the interest rates, the higher the technical progress. So that is like kind of the reverse. So the higher the interest rates, it would be a plus if that was higher technical progress, but here it's now the lower the interest rates, the higher the technical progress. So it's the flip side. Low interest rates also allow low productivity firms to survive. Not fun to know, but it's a fact. You can, if you don't have to pay anything on your assets, basically, then you can survive for quite a while. The same is true for taxes. The lower the taxes, the higher the technical progress. The higher the taxes, the lower the technical progress. So because you simply don't have as much free money to reinvest. So it's also negative for low productivity firms if you have high taxes. And the one that's most in the debate right now, if you have a low minimum wage, no one is interested in applying technology. If you have a high minimum wage, well, what would you expect companies to do? Look for places where they can replace workers with machines. So a high minimum wage is great for technical progress, but it's of course bad for low productivity firms because they need to pay more. So if the job churn is high, then people move away from low productivity firms. So that's bad for low productivity firms. But we had low job churn, so that actually allowed people to stay or have low productivity firms retain their workers. So now this may all change. So and if we think of if we have a lot of technical progress, they will attack low productivity firms, low productivity sectors. And so if we have a lot of low productivity firms, that's also an incentive for researchers to look into technical progress. So whatever you look at, we are in a situation where all the factors that I've listed here favor adaptation and adoption of new machines and new technical progress. So the macro environment is pretty much like it's almost like global warming for hurricanes, So we all know that global warming doesn't cause hurricanes directly, but they favor them in the sense that if the oceans heat up, then you have more differences in the like heat differences in over the ocean, and what you then get is, well, wonderful little whirlwinds over the ocean, and then you get a perfect storm. So that doesn't guarantee a perfect storm, but it really favors technology adoption. And what it specifically does, it creates a large number of unfilled positions for people that are actually needed, like engineers and so on, because people that can handle this technology will be, of course, in high demand. On the other side, we will have large numbers of potentially even large numbers of unemployed or discouraged workers. And here, I really want to say these are people that need retraining. I don't mean that they will stay in unemployment for long or so, but this is our challenge, that we move as many of those up into this category. Okay, otherwise we'll get this or that or that. We've seen that. Okay, so when will that happen? Okay, so, well, as you know from my last talk, it actually has. It already has, just in the manufacturing sector. And it's the same in the future. We shouldn't expect like all sectors to be affected all at once. So like, that's really not what anyone can expect, because just talk to manufacturers. They will tell you automation is hard. It's not easy. But once one guy figured it out, then the others are pressured to figure it out as well. And so then you get an avalanche. And so in the case of manufacturing, as I explained last time, it was really exposure to robots that explains that, with each robot on average chasing away 5.8 jobs. And if that is the case, again, this is a simulation from last time that I showed you. If just for the manufacturing sector, this is the path that we should expect if historical conditions stay the same and nothing else happens, all else equal. And there's plenty of things, of course, that will make this line definitely tick somewhat upward, and we can discuss that in the Q&A if you're interested. But as you see, the beginning is slow. But once we're there, it hits hard. And that is what I explained to you with the exponential function. And we already have some examples here, and that is Amazon. Mind you, Amazon is a fast-growing company. Just think about it. If Amazon was growing at 2-3% per year, how many employees they would have if they had such robot growth. And as you also like, this is the one that I promised to repeat. These were the adoption rates for historical comparison of IDT growth in the 90s and industrial equipment growth in the 80s. This is the industrial robot growth before COVID. This is wait a second. This is the household robot growth. This is the professional service robot growth, and this is the exoskeleton growth that we're seeing right now. And so these are all above the historical precedents. But how quickly it will play out really depends on the interplay of those 4 factors that I've shown you last time: speed, size, substitution, technology, and scale. So, if say there was a large scale replacement, I'm just making that up because it's easy to explain, not that I think that this is the first one, say in the trucking sector, that we now get self-driving trucks for all long-distance trucks. That will set more than 1 million people free in long-distance trucking. And so where will they go? And literally overnight, because you can, very easily equip every long-distance truck right now that you have into turn it into a fully autonomous truck then. So, but if there are lots of workers set free there, then the warehouse sector may be able to acquire relatively affordable labor. Again, not that the truck drivers will like to switch their current incomes to that of a warehouse worker, but this will then reduce the incentives for the warehouse providers to push for technology adoption. So it's a really complex interplay here. And so that makes it so hard to come up with some direct predictions. But one thing that we should be aware of, we see the robot revolution already play out for certain groups, but the only way that we can see it is really through looking at data filters. What you see here is the employment to population rate. Oops, sorry. the employment to population ratio of less educated minorities in the Midwest from 2009 to 2017. So this is the employment population ratio. The higher, the more people are actually, the higher share is employed in this group. This is the employment to population ratio that we have seen with the recovery that we had in that time frame. Had we just normal development without accelerated growth through the recovery, this is what we would have seen. Now, add to that the exponential function. So they would have seen a drop of 4 to 5% here, roughly. Let's make it simple so that I can do it in my head and say it was 5%. And this was a 8-year time frame. So in this 8-year, like in the exponential function tells us if robot adoption continues the same way, this 8% in those this 5% in those 8 years will be 10% in the next 8 years, and then 20% in the 8 years thereafter. So within 16 years, we'll actually have a 30% difference. So this would mean we will, instead of 45% employment to population ratio, if it all continued the same way as before. This is a simulation, not a forecast, not a prediction. A simulation would tell us that we go down to employment to population ratios for this group that is literally off the charts, because it would be at 15% here, below that line in the next 16 years. So it is starting to happen. We see it already. Will it be, when will it be large scale? That is a really difficult question. So I actually want to leave that rather to the discussion and say, now spend my last 5 minutes or so on what can we do. When I was thinking through that problem, I was really reminded of what we all are aware of because we live close to the ocean, the tides. They're low tides, they're high tides. And we all know what we need to do when the tide's coming in. You know, we better take our chair and move away, correct? But there's also the possibility that from time to time we may get a storm surge. Then we better take our chair and really take it in. And maybe we want to build some reinforcements, as you can see here. The third possibility, of course, is like, that we get of course, this is a science fiction, tsunami that swallows entire cities, as the artist has put it together here. The only thing that he can do here, a little bit of like, a little wall like this will not break a tsunami. The only thing that you can do then is really run for the high grounds and, stay there. So how does that but what I want to have you see here, in all 3 cases, we need to move out of the water, correct? And that's exactly the same thing what's going to happen here. Regardless whether you believe that we'll have no unemployment, high unemployment, a storm surge, or a tsunami, we need to do certain things no matter what. And they're identical regardless whether we see high unemployment or not. We may have to just reinforce that. Let's look at this, what this could be. And I'll go through those in a second. Let's say if this was our timeline, we're here right now, and this is some time in the future, maybe 20 years in the future. This is the path of jobs with no accelerated automation, just the regular one that we had in the past. So say we had accelerated automation and we do nothing, then this may be our employment situation. Well, but there's some things that we've always been doing, like, they were entrepreneurs, they came up with new ideas. And then we had some industrial policy tools, and I'll discuss what they could be in a second. Actually, there's more room for industrial policy than ever before, is my claim. And there's, of course, education. This is how much we can probably take care of if we get a storm surge, and we can manage that storm surge. If it's going to be a tsunami, we need to come up with something entirely different, like a social renegotiation in the form of universal basic income, or what I prefer is a negative income tax, which we can discuss if you are interested in. Now, first, towards innovation. If you have lots of substitution technology, you also have huge innovation opportunities, and a lot of them we're actually quite familiar with. So this is both a threat as it is an opportunity. Secondly, education. Well, education is key. We all understand that. We need to bring people to the jobs that will have the type of skills that people or companies will require. So there's something to be important to know about that. So because whenever we have technology that replaces tasks, completely takes over, then the wages go down. Whenever it augments tasks, then the wages actually go up. So what we need to do is we need to find ways how we can replace the tasks, move the tasks that are replaceable to those that are augmentable, or move people away from the tasks that are currently susceptible to automation, to types of tasks and activities that are not so susceptible. So here is the share of the time of predictable physical work that can be replaced by currently proven technologies. And those make up 18% of the total time spent. For processing data, it's this and so on, and like we want to move them over there. So we want to get pretty much something like this to happen. So how can we do this? So one way to think about that is, you look at data. So WRCOG has charged us earlier on to actually find out what are the work activities currently in the WRCOG economic region that are important right now and which ones will be important in the future. And what I've listed here are only top 3. So, and you can see that not everything goes completely away. So this one, for example, and there are, I think, 50 or so, but I just show you the top 3 because if I show you 50, you wouldn't see anything anymore. And so, but certain things just completely go away or go into much lower ranks. And so we need to make sure that we train people and find people that have those skills. But we also find out that there's a certain set of set-free skills. So the question is, can we do something with this? So, consultants have argued, yeah, we need to just move people from current occupations into the types of occupations that are, not so susceptible in automation. Yeah, that's actually easier said than done, because what you see here is these are the types of jobs that people do: more emphasis on physical work, more emphasis on communication and critical thinking, more emphasis on operating machines and processes, and so on. If you are in a group like this, it doesn't do much if you move from one to another. You need to be moved entirely out of this corner into this corner, or this corner into this corner, or at least a little bit further down. And that's hard. Education helps, but it's not really a cure-all. What you see here are the best. This is the pay scale going up from low, like this is median here, to really high. And this is educational level. And the size of the bubble tells you how many people work in there. And so if you look at no formal education credentials, they're all low pay scale and most vulnerable. These are all highly automatable jobs. So if you have a bachelor's, a master's, you're up in this category. Well, some are actually even some, people with bachelor's and associate's degrees have high risk of automation, for example, accountants and auditors. So let's look at accountants, what we can do. It turns out if you look at the job profile of an accountant, it's actually, in terms of the called aptitudes, what people are able to do and applying in their job, it's very similar to what a manager of computer operations does. Can you see that? So the question is, can we do that at a large scale? And the answer is yes, you can do it with like a data-driven approach, and that's something that I'm working on right now. So you can literally, for each job, find out what is the least cost transition to a job that is actually less automatable. And then the last step in here is the industrial policy part. That is, what can we do in terms of finding entirely new jobs in our region? Can we do any industrial policy? And so, yes, we can look at the workforce characteristics of our current industries, find out what the workforce characteristics are that are going to be likely shed in terms of the people that are going to be set free, and can then figure out what type of industries would be best suited to actually match those skills that are going to be set free. So we've developed a data-driven approach where we can figure out how to match things for, say, West Riverside County, and I'll show you those results in a second. The second is that you can train your workforce to match the skills of the industries you would like to attract. But then you need to do a least cost analysis, which ones make the most sense. And as I said, this requires a deep understanding. And so what we did is we actually looked at 286 workforce characteristics across ability, skills, knowledge, work activities, work contexts, education, training, work styles, and interests, and then try to figure out which ones match best. And I skip a few things in order of time. And so just trust me that we, like with this, then we looked at kind of, in terms of the set free workforce in West Riverside County, what kind of industries would be the best match? And so we found the top 20 most compatible industries. We also, so you might think of like, we should attract those, but like it's really hard to attract utilities. So we thought of like, can we do a better approach? So we looked at the top 25 compatible industries for West Riverside County and looked at the ones that kind of give us a strategy. And so I'm not going to go through them in detail now. I'll just like summarize it for you. So the data suggests that we want to actually try to attract, believe it or not, manufacturing. So we can, with the workforce and the type of people set free, attract enterprises, specifically say companies that want to repatriate. COVID-19, as you may have heard me say in other talks, actually made a lot of companies rethink repatriation. Automation also favors repatriation because it's now cheaper to produce at home than abroad. So manufacturing is, for the area, an interesting field, but we need to prepare the training resources. The second thing is we need to have entrepreneurship. We need a nurturing environment that really provides high quality living spaces. And I know you don't like to hear that, but if you add more warehouses, you reduce great living space. And so entrepreneurs don't like to drive past 20 miles of warehouses till they get to their home and see the block of the walls of the warehouses from their windows. And then actually, the other one that showed up for us is entertainment, and this complements the other two. So what can we do? We can educate and train, and I be happy to address that in the Q&A section. From middle school onward, pamper our entrepreneurs, retrain, and attract manufacturing industries, but also prepare infrastructure. So going back to the daily questions, you probably recall my daily questions. What can I do to help society? Maybe you can think of a question like, for your fridge, what do I need to do today to help prepare my region, my company, my department, my staff for the coming changes that automation surely will bring? What skills do I and my staff members need to acquire in order to meet this challenge a little better than yesterday? And so some sample initiatives just to prime the pump. If you're thinking of educational resources, think about AI, VR, like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, or augmented reality-based training opportunities in your region. identify the jobs in your region or company that are hard to be filled in the future. And that's the stuff that we've already done for West Riverside Council of Governments area. And then if you're an individual, ask someone to find out which other professions have similar skills profiles. There are also resources from the BLS, do a transferable skills analysis, or if you're a region, you can do that with a data-driven analysis. So I recommend really try to preserve your resources for your entrepreneurs, high quality living areas, accelerate automation in the public sector. Robotic process automation is for you. If the more resources you have, like set free right now, that means you can help those entrepreneurs and new companies. Recession-proof your budgets, not something that you like to hear, but although we just came out of COVID and there's no recession on the horizon from my perspective right now, that's just for the next 3, 4, 5 years, but that will be with us longer. Build up future-oriented educational resources and reduce setup and transaction costs for your entrepreneurs. Recall, it happened before. That was the Easter Parade in 1900. I showed you that last time, with all horse carts. This is the Easter Parade in 1913 in the Fifth Avenue, all cars. I think we need to start today. Otherwise, take out your swim vests. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to address any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moenius. Wow, yeah, definitely such thought-provoking and stimulating information. And we do have a couple questions here, so I'm going to start by asking those. And for all of the attendees who are on with us, if you have additional questions, there's still time. Please go ahead and put those in the question and answer area below. Okay, first question here. Could the implementation of robots increase the gap between skilled and unskilled individuals, but also between developed and emerging societies even further? So I'll let you answer that first part, and then there's a second part to it as well.
Well, in terms of income inequality, it's actually one of the things that I'm really, really concerned about. I do see that even if we get away with it with like full employment, I am quite worried that we'll see people on the lower end of the educational distribution really suffer, and that this is going to drive or increase the wedge between those groups. There might be also an alternative where people's choices, as I briefly mentioned, actually drive automation. So just think about it like everyone here in the room says like, hey, I don't want to work in my office anymore. I want to work from home. And if you don't do that, my dear employer, I'll quit. That's kind of like one of the common themes that you hear in the news today. So this already, I mean, the COVID has driven this kind of development already. I'm talking to you online. I'm not in front of an audience in person. And so the same is true for then, other types of work environments where we say, yeah, I don't want to, run around in the dirt anymore. Give me a robot that does that, and things like that. And so it might be actually that given the tight labor market that we're seeing right now, that the tight labor market and the requests of the workers will drive automation in a positive way. But at what time? Will that become sustainable, or will automation then outpace those requests? That's the big question. The other thing is just think about, like, I mentioned repatriation of manufacturing. If we repatriate manufacturing into the United States, that's great for bringing high-paying manufacturing jobs back to the United States. But it also means that a lot of people in those other countries will lose their jobs. And so educational resources here are way better than in other countries, but they're more hungry. They have more hunger for education, and there are also more opportunities and more cheap technical things that can drive education in those countries. And so it's very hard to say whether it's going to widen the gap or it's going to narrow the gap in general. But I do my personal feeling based on historical evidence is that some countries will move ahead and actually be able to close the gap, and some countries will fall behind. Similar to as we'll see in regions in the United States.
Great question. Thank you for that. Second part of the question is, do you foresee that robots may become taxable to replace some of the tax revenues lost? So I know you talked about taxes a little bit in here. What are your thoughts on that?
So, like, of course, it's a possibility to tax robots. You can. The question is whether you want to, and have you really thought through the consequences? If we tax robots, it means that other countries that don't tax robots will have the opportunity to do things over there cheaper than here. So it depends on how you do it. Do you want to tax them a little bit, or do you want to tax them a lot, or how do you want to do it? So my question is rather, why is there's such a big difference between the taxation between labor and capital, and shouldn't we just move away from that to some to an extent where we tax consumption? Then people that consume a lot will pay a lot, and people that consume little don't pay much. We can have categories like food and things like that completely tax-free, and luxury goods really taxed highly. So it's just, there are several different options how to deal with it. Do you want to have a negative income tax so that I can hire someone literally for $1 if in such a situation, and he will get a negative income tax, meaning a subsidy basically to make up to the minimum wage or a little bit above that if he works. So there are all kinds of alternatives, but I'm quite frankly not in favor of taxing robots, because I think it just will pretty much hurt the competitive position of the United States internationally. And transaction costs will go down, international transaction costs. So competition will become tougher internationally.
Yeah, I definitely see your perspective, and I think that could obviously go hand in hand with the conversations about offshoring versus nearshoring and that whole conversation. So whether or not we tax other countries' tax obviously could severely affect those efforts as well with nearshoring and everything. So very interesting information. I don't see any other questions here, Dr. Moenius, but as one attendee pointed out, there's a lot of great information that you covered. So I just want to remind everyone that the YouTube video will be posted to our channel by this afternoon. I'm going to put that again in the chat here so you can see our YouTube channel and copy that. And I again thank you, Dr. Moenius, for the presentation. Fantastic as part one, as part two. So if you haven't watched part one and you're interested, that's also available on our YouTube channel. I encourage you to go take a look at that. Comment here, great insight. So yes, 100% agree with that. And the County of Riverside Office of Economic Development is here and to support your business needs, and we are committed to providing webinars like these. So if you aren't already following us on social media, we are on most all social media platforms, or I encourage you to visit our website, rivcoed.org. You can sign up for our newsletter to stay in tune with what webinars we are hosting and a part of. So I thank you all for your time and appreciate your sharing this morning, Dr. Moenius. So thank you everyone so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And if, as I said, if you're interested in like a student's perspective or the business perspective, please take a look at my LinkedIn account this afternoon. I will make sure that I post both pieces of information for you before lunch today. Thank you very much again.
Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Take care.